What's up, everybody? It's the boxing show with Dakota and Lukie. I am Lukie. That is Dakota. Dakota, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, my friend. Rainy day here in New York, but we got a nice little card this week that was, I would say, reminiscent of the kind of cards that have gotten me excited traditionally throughout my time in the sport.
Yeah, and I think that the big thing for me, at least, was the level of emotion from William Zepeda in an era, and we will talk about on this show, where we've learned to love or be told that it's all about the money, something that sadly I think about a lot lately. It's somewhat refreshing to see legacy, purpose, and a title, yes, just a title, means so much in defining one's legacy. For William Zepeda, seeing him beat Lamont Roach, who you told me on a phone call, pre-show meeting, he took the fight. All he's done is fight tough guys. And Zepeda, who I suspected might be at the end of his road, rewrites the chapter, wins the fight, becomes an outright world champion. And now we start to wonder, just how great can William Zepeda be?
Yeah, and to be honest, I felt more optimistic than I felt like the narrative about him after the Shakur fight, because I felt like he was the first guy to give Shakur any kind of business in his whole career. And I felt like that there was some merit to that it wasn't just that, oh, Shakur made a choice to have a hard fight. I think that there's a level of skill and craft to how he closes distance and how he, keeps his offensive output. He has a high engine, but he's not a Joe Joyce, right? He's not just getting hit clean all the time. He stays at the end of his jab. There's a lot of nuance and skill in what William Zepeda does, and I think that Shakur fight showed that. And I think some of what maybe we saw in like the first Farmer fight, he talks about he had 3 fights in 9 months. That's a lot, especially in the modern era of boxing, and 2 fights with Tevin Farmer in like a 6-month period is no joke. Clearly as an action fighter, as a come forward output fighter, the time off served him. And I always kind of felt like going into it, like, I think Lamont's a tremendous fighter, but my question was just always, does Lamont have the output or the firepower to give Zepeda a reason not to come in? And he ultimately didn't, right? Lamont held his feet. He did counterpunch effectively in spots, but the volume just wasn't there, and Zepeda was relentless and won it clean. But man, Lamont showed a lot of balls in that fight. We haven't seen him really get hit like that or really have to dig down in that way. And he did, and maybe even won the last round of a fight that he was clearly losing.
I think also on a deeper level, I did the Good Fight post-fight show on Saturday. Obviously, outstanding program. And a lot of people were kind of questioning the Roach team, the game plan, and etc. And I think Zepeda is one of these guys where you could have a perfect game plan and he's throwing a bunch of baseballs at you. And if you're not taking the baseballs well, or they overwhelm you at points, I compared it to like, a tidal wave comes and you get a little water in your lungs and water in your eyes and water in your nose. And even though you know what you're supposed to do, there's a physical component to Zepeda's style that's not just technique. I heard people saying, "Oh, he's implementing more distance and strategy." And sure, he did that, but to me, what really makes him a world champion is there's a component that it's a one of one. When you're in there, he makes it a physical sport, and you just have to respond in the moment. That's what makes him a special fighter, is that it's not about as much strategy as how do you handle this person that you really can't get anyone to emulate.
And his pace is not going to dip down at any point during the fight. His power is not going to dip down at any point in the fight. You could see that. We know what kind of chin Lamont's got, and you could see the fight starting to wear on him physically in a way that I can't ever remember a fight doing for him. You know what I mean? But I do think that, Zepeda definitely jabbed more in this fight. I don't think that's the only reason he won the fight, but I think that, like Lamont said it in the post fight, where he was like, I thought this guy was a one-trick pony, and he's not that. You know what I mean? Like, I love Isaac Cruz, but this is not an Isaac Cruz. This is a guy that has like what he's in my view, at least at lightweight, he's like the highest level a pressure fighter could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a fascinating fighter, right? And I think that these are the type of wins that breed more enthusiasm about a fighter's career. Because to me, I felt like he was trending the wrong direction. You know, the Tevin Farmer
Why do you
fight,
say that?
the punch
I'm
output,
genuinely curious.
the punch output to me against Shakur Stevenson. Yes, it was a competitive fight, but the punch output didn't feel the same. It felt like Shakur was able to solve that. To see him get dropped by Tevin Farmer, to see him very competitive in those fights, it feels like he has a physical style, and he's been fighting that way since 2020 when he beat Ramirez and then he beat Hector Tanahara. And to me, just knowing the human body, can you fight this physical, this much punch volume for 7 straight years? The answer is basically yes. But I had to wonder, like, can this sustain? We don't typically
Sure.
see you don't typically see guys like Navarrete fight for 11 years. Typically,
But
there's like a
I think the way I viewed the Shakur fight was like, and I don't remember exactly, but it felt like through 8, it was kind of even. And then Shakur did the great fighter thing and kind of pulled away in the last 3 to 4 rounds of the fight. And I didn't necessarily view that as anything negative about Zepeda. I was like, Zepeda, gave one of the great efforts of his career, and a great fighter was just able to kind of beat him to the finish line. And it seems to me like, maybe that performance was the one where he reinvented himself a little bit and then took this break, you know what I mean, and let his body get a little bit of a break and a little bit of time off, and is even that much more, driven because he didn't get the win in that fight.
Well, so the way I perceived it coming in was momentum. I saw Lamont coming off of 2 big wins. He's a sharpshooter.
They weren't wins though.
Well, but they were draws, but I think they were like spiritual wins. They were fights that I think improved his stock, that people made him a main event fighter, and he's very intriguing to the average fan. And I love at the press conference, they go, they're both coming off of losses, so people have
Well, but Lamont also said that he felt like they were losses. So I think that does speak maybe a little bit to, like, to us, we're like, those are great performances, but in his mind, because he's a competitor and he didn't get the win, he's viewing that like, I haven't won a fight in 2 years, and I'm looking at those as losses, even if the public, perceives me that, you know what I mean?
Well, I think that there's a level. How do I say this? I think for Lamont, he's a borderline Hall of Fame boxer if he got those 2 wins, because he would have been a 3 division world champion and he would have been the first man to beat Gervonta Davis. And I think because Gervonta is so famous that any loss, people that are fans of Gervonta in this modern era are probably going to crap on him. And we're waiting to go, yeah, look. And I also think that there was an element of Zepeda's a tall fighter, and Lamont's had success against guys that are a similar height to him. There might be some truth to that. I think Lamont's an accurate counterpuncher. Zepeda didn't respond the way I expected to the counterpunches. That's inherently going to be an issue with Zepeda. If you can't stop Zepeda, or you can't figure out a way to offset his volume, it's going to be tough. But I also think in round 9, Zepeda was starting to fade. Lamont was starting to take over the fight. And Zepeda made a mental decision that on this night, I'm not getting knocked out. I'm not going to fade. I'm going to win the fight. And I think that can't be understated. So I think more than what Lamont didn't do, it was about Zepeda, who I thought was losing all the momentum in his career, making a decision that, this is going to be the day that I'm an outright world champion. My career is not over. And I think that at least to me, I'm a boxing guy, I felt like his momentum was going the wrong way. And, now he's one of the more exciting guys. You've got in this division, we got Abdullah Mason as a champion. We got Zepeda just recently. Like, I think August 11th, there's going to be a purse bid for Lucas Body versus Floyd Schofield for the WBA belt. Who knows if it seems like Muratalla is going to move up? Who knows who's going to be the IBF? But Zepeda is right there with an argument for being the best lightweight in the world, along with Abdullah Mason. And leading into this, I don't think people saw him the same way. So I think it really was a special fighter having a special performance.
And I think making an argument that he's the best lightweight in the world right at this very second, if you were doing your rankings, I think it's hard to make an argument that he's not number one.
You're talking yourself into trouble right there, because when you do rankings, it's subjective. So, I mean, there's going to be people that are drawn to the style and the power of Abdullah Mason, and there's going to be people that are drawn to the volume and the busyness and the resume of Zepeda. Quite clearly, if that unification bout could be made between Zepeda and Mason, that's one of the best fights to be made in boxing.
I couldn't agree more, man. And Abdullah is a much more aggressive front foot fighter than Lamont is. And even at that, Zepeda forced Lamont to fight, but Zepeda and Abdullah would just be a head-to-head clash.
Yeah, it'd be great. So let's talk about Raymond Muratalla. He beats our guy Robson Conceição in the fight. After the fight, he announces basically that he's moving up to 140 pounds. Just assessments on the performance and his future moving up in weight.
I thought it was a good performance. He took a capital C contender and beat him like 11-1, 10-2. It wasn't easy. Conceição still has his legs. He still has the ability to counterpunch and to move. He still got some hand speed. He was a guy moving up in weight, but he's always been a massive guy for 130. So it looked like, obviously Muratalla looked like the bigger guy, but I felt like Conceição was a legitimate lightweight once they started fighting. There wasn't necessarily anything spectacular about it, but he was able to, basically dominate a long-time contender who has been at the top of the game for a hot minute. And I think it's a good way for him to close out his lightweight career.
Yeah, I think it's understated that Muratalla beat 2 Olympic gold medalists in his lightweight campaign. Andy Cruz obviously is a 2020 Olympic gold medalist, but Conceição won it in 2016 in Rio. Muratalla has a lot of things that I like. He's got some of, I wouldn't say exactly the angles of Lomachenko, but he does cut angles. I'd say he cuts angles kind of like Bam Rodriguez. But to me, and I think you're the one that put me onto this, he really reminds me a lot of a prime Mikey Garcia, where he's working to get you on the ropes, and then he's going to turn angles and look to land big game-changing punches. And the one thing I noticed about this fight with Conceição was he got hit a tiny bit, causing an abrasion under one of his eyes, which I started to notice, which I do think kind of kept him at bay to not press forward. And there was a little bit of concern I had, which could be the weight cut, or it could be his focus in the fight, that he wasn't cutting off the ring as I expected. So I'm curious to get your insight. Which one is more true?
Well, I thought that Conceição was changing direction pretty effectively. And so, and I think maybe some of the difference with Muratalla is that he does kind of keep you arm's length. He's not necessarily as much a body-to-body guy. You know what I mean? So when he gets you on the ropes, he's keeping it kind of long. And I think that Conceição was able to just change directions. And so it became kind of a little bit more of like a sharpshooting fight. And I thought that Muratalla was still effective in doing that, in landing the cleaner, harder shots, from an arm's length.
Yeah, it is. It is not. I don't know. It was, to me, it was like,
it didn't blow you away.
Well, no, but it's not even that it didn't blow me away. It's like, these are the type of performances that I call real championship performances, where no one gets excited, but it was kind of a trap fight. And even though he didn't have his best stuff, he won dominantly. And it speaks to the fact that I think Muratalla can be a long-reigning champion who's completely undervalued in the sport, because these are the fights that lesser champions don't win. And I think that we're kind of missing these kind of fights in boxing, the true title defenses that are a little bit harder than you think. And I just found it to be professional is the best way.
Yeah, that you would just take a hard, even if you're favored, that you would just take a hard, credible fight while you wait for the big one.
We're going to get into it later, but Keyshawn Davis has a situation about the business of boxing. Nothing about this fight screams like this makes sense from a business standpoint. This is a pure sporting, I want to get back in the ring. Let me get a fight.
Yeah.
Here's a guy that most fans probably don't perceive as good as he really truly is. And it's a fight I have to train really hard for. It's a guy who's not going to, pack it up. And I can get hit in it, and he probably hits harder than you think. And for me, it's like Muratalla is really developing into one of the more promising fighters in the sport. I think currently he is the fighter of the year in 2026. I think the conversation is between him, David Benavidez, and who was the other person that we said was in the running?
I mean, it's hard to ignore in a way.
It's just he's not going to fight enough. Because wasn't that the argument when everyone wanted to give him the award over when we gave Crawford the award for
Crawford
Spence?
only fought once. You know what I mean? So there's been times where individual performances can get you a fight of the year. The fact that he was fighting a generational fight against his contemporary.
It might be his year.
I'm just saying, it wouldn't be the first time a one-fight fighter got that award.
Well, I guess what I was saying is a lot of Inouye's fans would get frustrated when I gave Crawford Fighter of the Year twice for fighting once. But it's like the irony is I might give him Fighter of the Year when he fights once, because it's like it doesn't mean much to me when you're fighting two fights where you're favored 20-1 or something. Like when you have every advantage over an opponent fighting 4 times as a champion, I'd rather just see one fight that impacts culture a lot,
I mean, it's the biggest, most significant fight of the year by far, I would say, no?
Probably. But I think that it was also that fight was marketed wrong by the media. It was marketed as like this all-time Brandon Rios, Mike Alvarado slugfest. And it was two tacticians, really engaging in a strategic battle. And I think that there was a little bit of people sighing, and it wasn't what they expected. And I think that that's hurt the legacy of the fight in America, as people kind of set the fight up to fail.
Man, that's unfortunate, because I do think that in most cases, with a fight of that magnitude between two greats of an era, that fighter would generally get Fighter of the Year. Like the fact that Crawford got Fighter of the Year when he fought Canelo was because he did something historic,
Yeah. So let's go to the undercard. My guy Quinton Randall, Raul Curiel, absolutely sucked. Just everything about it kind of hurt my soul. Obviously, Q is one of my guys. I actually like Curiel too a lot. I think Curiel's a good fighter, but it's like everything about this just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Curiel comes in 1.5 pounds overweight, then it goes to 1.2 pounds overweight. And, I thought Quinton won, as I said to you, through 6 rounds, 4 rounds to 2. At the very least, he wins the 9th round. So that would have made it 5-5. Yes, he didn't finish the fight the way I would have hoped. He didn't finish strong, but it felt like he kind of had Curiel's number. He won a fight. I don't believe that I guess, how do I say this? It feels like if Quinton was being promoted or marketed as an A-side fighter, he'd get the benefit for his fighting style. But then when you're coming in and fighting the house fighter, you get no benefit. And then the spit on your face is the 100-90 scorecard, which to me just doesn't reflect reality. 97-93 felt a little wide to me too. I could maybe see 96-94 if you give Curiel every benefit of the doubt. But I guess what hurt about this fight for me was, who knows where Quinton's career goes, but it's not like Curiel's career is going much further either, because it felt like this is basically where Curiel's at. He had trouble with the weight. Wasn't a great outing. And, what does he do? He rematches Alexis Rocha maybe again in LA. He fights some other guy. It's like, it really feels like it really felt flat, right? And it felt like it was an opportunity for Q to revive his career. And instead, what we get is probably the most lackluster result of all. Curiel wins a lackluster decision that with scores that don't reflect reality, in my opinion, and more than likely loses in his next 2 fights.
Well, yeah, and I think it's now there's like, oh, that's the style that Curiel has a hard time with. if you move, if you change directions, you don't let him set his feet, that he's just not particularly effective. And I think that Q made that very obvious, especially through the first 6 rounds. It felt like at a certain point that Curiel was able to impose his physicality a little bit more. And I think Randall was happy to go high guard and trade with him in the pocket. And I think he was effective at that in spots. But it gradually, through the last 4 rounds or so, became Curiel's fight. And so there was an optic that the momentum by the end was going towards Curiel. The problem was I had it 6-4 for Quinton, and there were some close rounds. If a judge had it 6-4 for of course, now I'm forgetting the name of the guy for Curiel, I would not have been furious about that, right? There was some close rounds that were tough to call. So anywhere 6-4 either direction, I'm good with. But like you said, the 100-90 kind of makes it's like a I never had a chance to begin with. And that's the most disheartening part about it, was if he lost a close fight, well, it was a close fight. And so that's the risk you take. But when those cards get read and you realize that one of the judges didn't give you a single round and there's multiple rounds that were obvious that you won, like that's the most disheartening part. Like I never even had a shot.
I'll let you take the lead on the Charles Conwell fight.
I thought Conwell was good, man. I thought that Kroll was definitely not the guy that I remembered from Showbox. He's a lot more flat-footed, and he just was much more hittable generally. And I know that Conwell's got a good engine, but he's not exactly a speed demon. I didn't really remember that about him. He's not the fastest guy in the world. What he is he's a guy who knows how to get himself in position, and he has a really great punch variety, but he's not a speed demon. And Kroll just looked very hittable on the inside and showed a lot of balls. But I thought it was a good win for Conwell, particularly when, he didn't fight for over a year, I believe. I thought, when you don't fight for over a year, there's times where you can come back and there's some ring rust that has to get shaken off. He didn't look like he had any ring rust. If anything, it looked like midway through the fight, he kind of hit a lull. But at the beginning of the fight, he looked sharp. He looked ready to go. And I think he's another exciting guy that you can add into the mix at 154.
I think Conwell's a hard person for most people to talk about. I'm quite fond of him, and I think that he has Hall of Fame attributes. People are used to seeing fighters, especially Midwest fighters, be the shell defense, reactionary counter punchers. He's a walk 'em down. He's almost like a Chavez Sr. Like he's almost like an old school pressure fighter, but he comes from the Midwest. And it's like
he's more like William Zepeda, if anything. He's like a poor man's William Zepeda or something.
It's like you don't think of like a Charles Conwell being like this walk you down pressure fighter who, in the broadcast, they were talking about he wants space, but I feel like part of his style is to lean on you and weigh on you and punch while you have to support his weight. And it's a lot of what he's doing is physical and mental pressure. He's fundamentally sound. He's really good on the inside, but it's about setting a pace and making you question whether you can fight through that pace. And I feel like the fact that I believe Paul Kroll was almost a 2016 Olympian. I think he had gone through the process, but he didn't make it. Charles obviously was on the 2016 team. I feel like when a great fighter like Conwell knows the fighter he's fighting, he's going to know what's required of him to pass the test. And I feel like very early on, he set a tone and set a pace that Paul just wasn't comfortable with when he knocked him down. It was almost like a slow, deliberate beatdown to the point where it wasn't even exciting at times. It was just mentally taxing and grueling.
What was exciting about it was to see Kroll's resilience. And to his credit, like the moments where it looked like he was going out and he kind of had one more volley in him. He might have even won a round or two in there, which I think made the fight compelling because he was getting beat up so bad that the fact that he stuck with it was compelling. He was just too hittable, man. And you could see, they said, he's fought 6 rounds in the last 4 years or whatever. You could see he hasn't been active. You could see that he's a full-time electrician, the way they were saying. You could see that the skill was there, but just that he's not a full-time
His
fighter
life
the way
his
that
life has
Conwell
moved
is.
on. It's
Yeah,
not his income. You can tell that like he's had to do other things to make his way in the world. And
yeah.
boxing's too hard to stay sharp at this level.
It's tough to you can get by on like not even like above a club level, but when you get up into that world championship level, if you're not full in all the time, it's tough to beat a guy like Conwell who's going to test you in a physical way that the only way you can prepare for that is putting in the time.
Now I want to switch gears on you and talk about Dylan Capetillo. I'm not sure if you saw this, but Dylan Capetillo, obviously, he's the son of Jorge Capetillo. Just kind of a beloved Las Vegas fighter figure. He's very, very passionate and speaks really good about boxing. He has a deep love of boxing. And I think anyone that's ever met Dylan really likes Dylan and wants the best for Dylan. Well, obviously he got knocked down and knocked out in his fight this past weekend. He's 17 years old, third fight, signed to Golden Boy Promotions. He dropped the fighter he was fighting before. I wanted to talk about how we always talk about how it's so hard to be a young pro. And here you have, the father is a celebrity trainer, been in Tyson Fury's corner, and you have the son and you see him that he's so excited to be a pro. He's wearing the outfits and you can tell that he really, really wants to be the next big thing. And I think people are rooting for him. But just the amount of pressure being in this situation and just how difficult it is to handle that position at 17 years old. I wanted to frame this conversation around that more than just the fight itself.
Yeah, I mean that's the risk you take when you turn a fighter pro that young, is that as spectacular as they are, regardless, it's boxing, and you could ultimately have a 17-year-old kid that's taking their first loss as a professional, and that's the place now that they're starting from in their career. It's like an inevitable risk, man.
Well, I think the other thing about Dylan is he didn't have the quote unquote traditional stellar amateur career. He wasn't a bad amateur, but it wasn't also like an amateur career that like you look at like a Keyshawn Davis and go, okay, he's got the prerequisites. So I think the danger here is that I think that he had always wanted to be a pro boxer, and who knows, he'll probably be a pretty good pro boxer. But it also tells you that boxing isn't fairy tales, that there is like right hands really matter, fights are tough, and that it's hard. Do you have any analysis on this?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you said it great. Like, I just think that maybe a 17-year-old, by and large, unless there's very special situations, and the only two that come to mind are Pacquiao and Canelo, who are coming from, they're not coming from the States. They're coming from different types of environments where, you can go pro
Extra
at 14,
motivation.
15. Yeah, you can go pro at 14, 15 years old. And here, there's so few examples. Not even just in boxing, man. Like there's so few examples of in a lot of sports, when guys are
Basketball.
this young. Yeah, like there's a lot of examples of guys coming out of high school, and there's always going to be the LeBron James or the Kevin Garnett, but by and large, that story is not a happy ending. You know what I mean?
Brandon Jennings, Jermaine O'Neal. I mean, those guys came out of high school, I believe.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, and they didn't have those careers where when you say their name, people are like, "Oh yeah, that's him." And you was, am I right that Brandon Jennings, didn't he come out of high school?
Pretty sure.
Yeah,
and was a great scorer early in his career, right? There was all this but when you don't have that, even like personal and emotional development, the first time you trip and fall, it's going to hit you harder than if you're an adult when that happens. You know what I mean?
So I have to go to the bathroom. I'm going to give you Dakota's 2-minute ramble.
What's my topic?
Well, I mean, I'd prefer if you did Pierce O'Leary versus Mark Chamberlain, but I'm not sure
I can get into that, man. That was a fun one
right now.
Yeah, I'll give you a little ramble on that. So it's funny because early in the fight, I was actually pretty impressed with some of the things that O'Leary was doing, and he was cutting off the ring real good, kind of a stockier guy. And I'm watching him like this is kind of like a poor man's Canelo, because he's coming forward, he's got decent feet, he's moving his upper body, he's making himself slippery, and then at some point, I can't remember what round, but Chamberlain catches him. He drops him a couple of times, and it becomes a whole different kind of fight where now O'Leary is compromised physically. That nose is clearly broken. And even at that, he sticks with it. He's able to put Chamberlain down with a body shot in the 7th. The fight momentum looked to be going the other way. And he had even won enough rounds that whoever was scoring on the telecast had it even. And then it was like in an instant, Chamberlain had him hurt again, turned him to the ropes and just hit him with a volley. And that was it. And man, a lot of times, like on a card like that, you don't always know that you're going to get a fight of the year contender, but it was like I didn't necessarily know that Liam Parrow and Lewis Crocker was going to be as good as it was. This was a real shootout, and definitely a fight of the year contender. You got to wonder, I know that especially with Katie Taylor getting ready to retire, that Ireland is kind of looking for like their new folk hero. And not only did he lose, it was a brutal fight for O'Leary. There's definitely something up with that nose after the fight. But he did show a level of grit to get back into that fight after getting dropped 2 times that I don't know that it necessarily hurts him as a folk hero. Probably hurts his body, might hurt his ego, but I think that people will stick with him after a fight like that.
So my thoughts are this is like one of those classic, really fun UK fights. But the problem is the Zepedas of the world or the Gary Antoine Russells are going to knock these guys out in 2 or 3 rounds.
Sure.
So it's not going to like age on the world class level as good. And I think that's the inherent issue kind of with the UK boxing is like a classic fight that really has significance in the UK gets propelled up to these huge levels. But the difference between like the domestic level and a world class fight sometimes gets skewed based on passion. And I think that like I'm looking at this fight as a great fight in the context of the emotion and all that, but I'm also not telling myself this felt like a world class fight. It kind of reminded me of
right.
Sam
I'm not
Eggington.
Convinced that Mark Chamberlain is a contender in the.
Well, to me, it reminded me of Nakatani and Inoue, how that fight happened. And then on the same day, we had Sam Eggington versus who was the guy that Kona Walker.
Yep.
And it's like you said it best, where it's like it's a fun fight, but it kind of doesn't feel like this in the same sport. Like it's a little different. And this fight to me, even though Zepeda Roach might not be as action oriented, it was just a better fight because there was more going on. And it's like to me, this was just like it's good for what it is, but I also understand that there's a tier below where this exists, at least to me.
Totally. I think the most obvious one is just general hitability. How easy is a guy to find? And if a guy's real easy to find and they're both easy to find, not even necessarily easy to find, they're just not world class at difficulty to find. You're going to have 2 guys that get real bloody and get real fucked up and get going back and forth. And they both showed a lot of balls and a lot of heart. No, I'm not discrediting any of that. It was an incredible fight, but you're right. When you start watching the best of the best, it just has a little bit, but not every fight has to have the same significance. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to figure out who's the biggest fish in the pond.
Well, I think that with the domestic guys, and maybe there's a little bit of this in the US, but I think in the UK there's a lot. There's this mentality, I'd call it like a football player in the US mentality when you bring them into box, that they want to show you that they can take a punch. Like the getting hit is part of like, come on, look at how tough I am. Whereas like definitely at the world-class level, most world-class fighters don't want you to see them get hit. It's almost embarrassing. Like the old adage I was always told is I've got a chin, but I'm not going to let you see if I have a chin. And in this fight, there was like a relishing in the toughness that they could absorb a punch, that I can take a punch, that I can come back from adversity. And I feel like that's kind of a trait of a truly domestic fighter.
That's a great. You put that beautifully, bro. It really is the being able to show that machismo or the desire to show that machismo is inherently not like a world class. I mean, it is, but it isn't.
And then you got the guys going, "Oh, that's so and so from down the way. Did you see how he took that punch? No man could drop him." And then that's kind of the appeal for him fighting Zepeda is like, I don't know. He stood up to the punch, and then Zepeda stopped him in like 3 rounds. And it's like, oh man, that Zepeda guy is good. He did it to him. And that's kind of like the art of boxing, right? For these regional guys, is they get their shot, but when they go to that next level, their fans might become another fighter's fan because they don't understand what the level jump is.
But I also think that's part of why those guys get so excited when it's their guys in a world-class fight. Like, you know, I don't think at any point they were the best in the division, but like Lee Wood and Mike Conlon, the first one, those were 2 guys that were in the top 10 of their division. And in terms of world-class fights for us, you know, that wasn't necessarily like the top of the menu, but that's part of why it's so exciting for them.
I'd argue that when we first started doing podcasts together, Lee Wood was one of those dudes. He didn't have a long window, but he was better than people would give him credit. But once again, Isaac Filmmaking in the chat says, I don't know if you guys have touched on this, but what are your thoughts on cable networks showing boxing again? Is it too little too late in the streaming era, Dakota?
I don't think it necessarily is, because there is still going to be a certain amount of cable audience of people that watch the NBA or watch, you know, certain other sports that cable TV still provides them for free. And I think to put boxing in the mix with that audience is not necessarily a bad thing. I think having it in multiple places is not a bad thing. They got to get their fucking microphone straightened out, right? Because every time they fucking send it over to the desk, nobody's mic is on, but they're gonna have to get that figured out.
I think that the issue boxing had, at least in the last 10 or so years, is networks have slowly started to lose trust and faith that they can get the best fights on their networks. I think when they felt as though that they were not getting the fights that they wanted to put on that would draw the eyes that they wanted, I think that's when we started to see a pullback in the investment in the sport. And it's not just one entity, but it was the fractured and fragmented nature of the sport. Hopefully, with everyone being on DAZN, the fights can be more feasible and realistic. But I think that boxing is coming back when there's a little bit of consolidation of promoters on one platform, because I think networks are saying, okay, if there's so many people at this one thing and we do elevated events, maybe we can actually get fights that get people excited.
And, you know, I thought it was kind of fun that Crawford and Bradley and Sean Porter have this little kind of like inside the NBA thing going on. I can't remember what the straight man's name was, but he was a great Ernie Johnson sub-in. I feel like he does a good job at kind of dishing. So I liked that chemistry. I liked that. I liked the production of it, other than their consistent microphone. Whoever's directing that shit was really fucking up, but it is what it is. They'll get that figured out.
Crawford, great analysis. Compared Zepeda to Joe Calzaghe, amazing comp. Like, that's a great comp.
I like it, but the difference to me is that I think Zepeda hits really fucking hard, and Calzaghe was like really fast, but a little bit of a slapsy. You know what I mean?
It was like a whipper. He's a little whippy and slappy. Yeah.
Whereas Zepeda, I think, is a physically grueling.
It's a brick. He's hitting you with a brick.
Yeah, everything's a 7 or an 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Zepeda's a hailstorm. You know, and there's different size hail, but it all hurts. You know, it's coming down with some ferocity and force. Let's get into your favorite subject, the business of boxing. Let's talk about Keyshawn Davis. And, you know, they go to purse bid. Devin Haney, obviously, WBO welterweight champion, go to purse bid. And now it appears Keyshawn Davis is not going to fight Devin Haney. I don't know how you can look at this and not blame Keyshawn Davis. You're the person, you're the fighter. Just a generally frustrating thing. And I think that my early sentiment is we got a Keyshawn Davis fight against Nahir Albright no fans were clamoring for because of some feud with his brothers and stuff. But then one of the most interesting fights in boxing, he's not going to do because of money. It inherently almost feels like a bully mentality to me, What are your thoughts, Dakota?
Well, and just the irony of, oh, you're doing it for money, but there's so much money you're leaving on the table. This is the thing that I don't understand about a lot of these guys is it's like his nickname is literally he's the businessman, but he just leaves all this money on the table. And because he thinks it's valued at more, somehow that makes you a businessman. No, you're just passing up opportunities now. You know what I mean? And I really can't understand it. I've always enjoyed watching his fights and I've enjoyed his talent, but like he's not active. He's blown weight. He's done a lot of different things to really rub people the wrong way and make him unlikable. And by and large, I've kind of lost interest in him, man, because he's not taking me seriously as a fan. So how am I going to take him seriously?
Yeah, and I think that the businessman nickname is probably an ode to Floyd Mayweather, and it probably sounds like wealth. You know, businessmen are rich, and in boxing, everyone wants to be rich, right? Because everyone's inherently poor if you get into boxing. So,
but Floyd didn't turn down the Margarito fight because it wasn't worth enough. He turned down the Margarito fight because he was being offered more for a different fight. That's doing business. Sometimes the business move isn't the best fight either. But when you just turn something down because you don't think it has enough value, but you've never made that much yourself, that's not being a businessman, dude.
Well, I think Keyshawn is going to be under a lot of scrutiny because this was a fight that was mandated, that was a generational fight that I think I was leaning as a 50-50 fight. But when a fighter doesn't take the fight, you have to think that they have some reservations about going into the fight.
And they had to find the, you know, I hate using duck unless it's like really blatant, but that's how it looks. That's how it looks. It looks like a duck. We used to use that term a lot more in boxing. That's how it felt when I saw that. I was like, oh, that's a duck.
Isaac Filmmaking, thank you once again for jumping in the chat. You're the third host today. Is the money aspect just an excuse to dodge the fight? It is becoming more apparent now. I mean, that's what Dakota said. I think that it's up to Keyshawn Davis to really justify this with another good fight afterwards.
And it better make more money. It can't be just that it's a better percentage of the, I'm going to turn down $2.5 million or whatever he was going to make because I'm going to get a majority of this million. That's not doing business.
Well, I mean, or get a belt. Like you could take less money but win a belt. At least you're fighting for legacy. But I think that the thing with him is when you don't give the fans the fights that they're really excited about, the fans have every right to scrutinize your decisions. And I think that, you know, Devin accepted the fight, and Devin gets a lot of goodwill for really a Keyshawn Davis decision. Like Devin's comes out looking kind of like, you know, the whatever you want to say, and he's been dealing with kind of issues since the Ryan Garcia fight.
Yeah, but he's also coming off one of the best wins of his career where he was the title challenger, moving up in weight, you know, and he won it dominantly. And Keyshawn is coming off blowing weight and fighting. I don't really even remember when. I mean, he's just so inactive. And I think some of these guys, like, they forget that they're not the center of everyone's life. And so when you're just not in the ring, bro, people forget. And every day you become less significant, even if you're the most significant thing in your own life.
Yeah, I mean, give me 1 second. Someone's trying to call me. So just talk one more second because it's linked to my computer.
Oh man, they got Lukie on.
Okay, I got you now. I'm back in the game, feeling like it. I think the problem with Keyshawn is he's fought twice this year, which is fairly active, right? But it's Jermaine Ortiz and it's Nahir Albright. Jermaine Ortiz is acceptable fight.
That's a good one.
Nahir Albright, it's like he won pretty convincingly in the first fight, and it was just like a comeback fight. It wasn't exciting. So it's like, okay, this would have been third fight of the year. But I think you and me view Keyshawn as a pound for pound level talent. So at a certain point, you know, you had just won a belt against Dennis Branchek on Valentine's Day 2025. And now we're waiting for you to go for a second belt. And we were hoping at 140, and then you miss weight at 140, and now you're at 47. It's starting to become high maintenance. we're starting to get a high maintenance fighter. And, it's up to us how much we want to be involved. But I do think
and also why you jump into weight classes. What does that say?
Yeah, it's just, I think it's just one of these things where it's like the talent is obviously there. It's just, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. And what is the ultimate objective? Is it just to get to the majority of the pot wherever you go? Or is it to make the most money possible and to have the best legacy possible? Because it seems like in modern boxing, that would be the idea. Let's make the most money we can, get the most legacy possible.
Makes me love William Zepeda even more and Lamont Roach, because all they're doing is just taking good fights, and we're never having to hear about the business. It's like with Roach.
And I bet Lamont's made more money than Keyshawn.
Ain't that something? And Zepeda might by the end of this year too, depending on what he does, because he'll just take fights. But frustrating situation being a boxing fan. Let's go over this week's fight schedule. We'll start with your girl Chernika Johnson taking on Dina Thorsland for the undisputed women's bantamweight title. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I haven't seen Thorsland, to be honest, but I've been very impressed with Chernika Johnson over the years. I think the fact that Ellie Scottney beat her so easily says more about Ellie than about Chernika. I think she's a quality champion. Definitely there's a style that exists that would give her problems, but we've yet to see too many people be able to do that effectively. I don't know if Thorsland is equipped for that. I'd kind of defer to you.
Got lost in the tabs. But so Thorsland was viewed as the best fighter in the division until Chernika moved down in weight and kind of had this run. And she was going to fight our girl, I believe, Sharetta Metcalf. And then she had a pregnancy. The pregnancy didn't happen. It was, I believe the word is miscarriage or something of that nature. And now she's heading into a fight with Chernika Johnson. My gut feeling is Thorsland probably wins it because she seemed to have a higher potential at her best. But given kind of the complications of her past year and a half, you never know. But I think in terms of Lionel Watson is saying tough fight for both, but Thorsland seems to be a better counterpuncher and will land the cleaner work. That's kind of how I feel. I feel like Chernika Johnson can be a little bit rough and physical and mauling at times. And I feel like Thorsland is a very, very good, accurate counterpuncher. I think that her and Mikkel Kessler are the two most distinguished fighters to come from Denmark. And I would not be shocked if she beats Johnson. That's kind of my sentiment is I think the world is more familiar with Johnson, but I think Dina Thorsland is probably the more skilled fighter of the two.
That'll definitely be one I got to do a little film study on. I don't think I've ever seen her before.
Yeah, I mean, she was just in a weird era, right? She's her prime was a little after COVID. Women's boxing didn't get the same level of exposure. And then when people are watching women's boxing fights is when she kind of didn't fight for a little bit. So it's she's kind of been in this mix where she hasn't really gotten her shine. She gets a big opportunity.
She didn't get to be in the post-Taylor Serrano world.
Yeah, it's maybe she had a fight one or two times, but not much. I got to ask you, I'm writing a story on Tam Theobald, very good fighter. And she's fighting for her first world title against Desley Robinson. So many interesting things about Tam. I think Tam has the elements of being a superstar. She's got a college degree. She speaks multiple different languages. Basically, if you want to feel inadequate, look up Tam Theobald's life up until this point, and you'll just feel like you're a failure. The one question I have is she went over to China and fought in the World Boxing Cup Stage 2 and lost in the finals to the undefeated Chinese boxer who's probably going to be the number one seed in the 2028 Olympics. Her name is Zai Yi Bao. And normally I would just look at this fight and go, okay, this is Tam's world title win. She's got superstar traits. She's probably going to maybe even stop Desley Robinson, who I think Robinson's a good fighter, but I don't think she's a great fighter. I think she's gotten away with physical toughness and strength, etc. Does that concern you a little bit that Tam in June went back to amateur boxing and now is fighting for a world title?
I think it's odd, right? Because we don't have that ability in the States, or at least our fighters in the States don't have that ability to go back to amateur once they've turned pro, at least as far as I understand. I know that, there's fighters in other countries. We saw Beatriz Ferrara was going back and forth. There's a lot of fighters from South America, certain parts of
It's
Europe
getting
that have done it.
normalized. It's just
Yeah.
getting normalized.
And I know that Tam is Canadian. Listen, I think that she's in a division that there's not a whole lot of talent. And I think she's somebody who's going to have to take the opportunities as they come. And maybe, going back to amateur boxing is a way for her to stay active and stay busy and not let her blade get dull, because there aren't too many opponents or dates or opportunities, for her in the pro game. And so the handful of world champions and quality fighters that there are, she's got to stay busy somehow in between.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I don't know.
And I don't know necessarily what to make of her losing. If you're saying she lost recently, is from what I'm gathering, it's a 3-round fight, but I do think that there is, for her, it's going to mean the same amount, I would think.
What's your perception of Tam? Because I look at Tam as someone that could be a main event fighter and could be like one of these big time fighters going into the next era of the sport.
My take is I see a lot of ability, and I see somebody who's just been so dominant in all of the fights I've seen her in. I wonder, not just is somebody going to be able to hang with her, but if somebody's able to put up some kind of resistance, how does she react to it? We really have no idea, because she's just been so dominant, at least in the pro game.
Yeah. Bipolar Boxing Picks. Afternoon, guys. Hope all is well. We hope everything's well with you too, Bipolar Boxing Picks. Great channel on the internets. My favorite fight on the card is our girl Chicken Metcalf. Sharetta Metcalf is taking on Amanda Gallet. I'm going with the upset pick here. I think Chicken's going to win this one. I think Amanda Gallet showed a lot of heart in her last fight against Johnson, Trinica Johnson. Gallet is really fun. I think she has like a karate-based style. She's like kind of jumps in and out and stuff. It's a contrast in styles and personalities. Metcalf, as you've talked with her, very to the point. I'd say very real. Not to say Gallet is not real. Gallet, to me, I feel like is someone who has to talk herself into fights. So the closer the fight comes, the more she's going to talk a little bit. I think it's going to build to a good fight. I think stylistically it's an interesting fight, and I think this is a sleeper. What are your thoughts?
It's always a sleeper when it's Sharetta, because she's such a spoiler, and it doesn't mean that she's unbeatable. We've seen her lose before, but she does have a way of kind of sticking around, and in moments where she needs to get a win, traditionally in her career she has. And I think this is kind of one of those moments again for her. And I think that, she's coming off arguably the best win of her career. So you would think that there's a certain level of momentum that she would like to keep going, coming off the win over Rosado. But again, 10 months out of the ring, is not the easiest thing in the world at the world-class level.
Yep. And then we'll jump over, Dakota's big Zuffa guy. Aaron McKenna is taking on, I don't even know this guy's name. He's your very generic IBF #1 ranked guy, Itanosa Olia. It's a vacant IBF title fight.
Never heard of him.
Somehow he's like #1 or #2 in the IBF. It tends to always happen that way. As of now, it's for the IBF vacant title. We'll see, because that's been an issue with Zuffa, but it appears that Aaron McKenna is going to be with Zuffa Boxing, but fighting for an IBF belt. That's a storyline to follow. To me, Aaron McKenna is one of the more promising middleweight guys. I think he's very underrated. I think he's a really good signing for Zuffa, because I feel like he wasn't getting the opportunities he was deserved as a fighter. And to me, this is like a 4-round fight. McKenna's going to blow through this guy, because this guy just does not have the level of competition I feel you need to fight him, Aaron McKenna.
Another guy though, bro. I'm realizing he hasn't fought since that Liam Smith fight. He's a guy who's been out for so long,
Well, I mean, that's kind of like the thing, right? There's two themes in boxing right now. There's fighters aren't getting enough fights because there's not enough dates, and every week isn't all that interesting. Like, there's enough for us to talk about, but there's not really like we got our good fight.
There's
of the
a
month.
lot of like, where the fuck you been?
Or even like we have good solid cards this weekend, right? Next week we got Shields returning. Okay, that's fine. Then we got Tio versus Rolly. But none of these fights feel like I have to stop what I'm doing. And it feels like we get one fight a month and then we get a lot of just what are we doing?
Yeah. And a lot of the, you know, what might be worth watching is not worth watching for the paywall that's in front of it.
Yep. So in the co-feature, this is one that I want to get Dakota's opinion on, especially the sports bettors are probably going to tune into this segment. Callum Walsh versus Tyler Denny. That's the co-feature on the Zuffa card. What are your thoughts on that? Callum Walsh looking really shaky in his first fight. Got dropped by Carlos Ocampo. He's coming in with Tyler Denny. I know Denny's not like the greatest, but he's pulled off upsets. He's tough. I'm not sure Callum Walsh is on Tyler Denny's level. Tyler Denny's older, so it's a good matchup, but I wouldn't be shocked if he lost.
I mean this respectfully. I don't necessarily understand the infatuation and the fixation on Callum Walsh. I mean, I know why it's there because Dana and UFC Fight Pass have kind of been backing him since before Zuffa was even an established promoter. But I don't understand. You know, there's so much talent out there, Lukie, and I don't understand why he seems to get a seat at the table every single time with this bunch.
Yeah, it's different. It's different. It's not normal. What are your thoughts on this fight, though?
I don't really know. Like he'll probably win it, you know, but I don't think there's going to be anything about it that's a wow factor. You know, I thought the fight with Fernando Jr. was a good one, but again, you know, he had moments where he just looked really shaky, and I think he's a good fighter, but I don't necessarily understand why he's the guy that's being forced down our throats. You know what I mean? There's always those fighters that get like a million opportunities and they get forced down. You know, for a while it was Broner for different reasons, right? No matter how many times he lost, he'd get another big opportunity. And, you know, I don't know how many times he fucked up. Like there's guys that just get a million chances. And with Walsh, you know, we don't even necessarily get like the spectacular knockouts, so there isn't any one thing about him that blows your mind. And while I respect him as a fighter, as an athlete, as a competitor, in the same way that I do all fighters, I just don't necessarily understand why he's what they're pushing so hard, why he's the one that Max Kellerman is comparing to Roy Jones. And it's all part of that sort of alternate reality over in the Zuffa universe.
Yeah, I hear you. Just to give you a little backstory on Tyler Denny, last fight was in March, lost a unanimous decision that was competitive to George Ladard, was knocked out by Hamza Shiraz.
Yeah, Hamza got him real good.
He stopped Felix Cash on Cash's comeback.
That was a hell of a performance. You got to give it to him on that one. But Cash was very much compromised, I would say, as well.
Then he had a run of beating undefeated kind of middle level guys. He beat undefeated Brad Pauls. He beat undefeated Bradley Rea, and he defeated River Wilson Bent after. So, I mean, this is, despite being in his mid 30s, this is by far the toughest fighter Callum Walsh has fought. And Callum Walsh has looked really, really shaky.
Yeah, and I think Denny's just enough of a stinker, you know, just enough of a spoiler that he might be able to pull it off. We'll see.
Bipolar boxing. Denny only has one KO, and it's hard to imagine him winning a decision in Ireland on a Zuffa card. I mean, if you do what you're supposed to do, anyone's going to win a decision anywhere. And I think there's a chance this is a levels gap.
I don't know, Lukey. We just saw Quinton get a 190 scorecard. I don't think anybody wins anywhere, brother. We know that.
Okay. Well, finally, you're going to love this one. Troy Williamson stopped Callum Simpson last year. They're rematching on his own. I'm sure you probably know nothing about either fighter, but do you have any thoughts?
I mean, Williamson fought my guy Ted Cheeseman back in the day and had some really classic fights. And then I remember Jahai did him real good and beat him up. And he's been up and down, man, but you got to give it to him. He's found a way to stay resilient and stay relevant, even despite having some tough losses over the course of his career, and certainly starting to establish himself regionally, at least as an elite level UK middleweight.
Well, I think that it goes back to what we were talking about, Pierce O'Leary and Mark Chamberlain. Those domestic level British fights, they're that level of like, see how tough I am. I can get hit. Look at what I do. And I think Williamson doesn't pride himself as much on that, and he hits hard enough where if like part of your shtick is like, let me get hit, let me come forward.
Yeah, let me show you how tough I am.
If you do that kind of gimmick with him, he can drop you, he can hurt you. So I think he fits in as like a good gatekeeper, kind of like Lyndon Arthur did. Where if
fantastic
you pull that
gatekeeper.
Where if you pull that shtick with those type of guys, then all of a sudden you can end up on your wallet. So that's kind of where I see him.
Yeah, and I think he could definitely be, one of these UK spoilers. Guys that, of course, the Brits get way too excited about some average-ass guys sometimes, right? We see it happen all the time. This could be the guy that ruins that party for them. You know what I mean?
I'm doing my research on the last fight. He stopped him in the 10th round. Simpson was down 4 times, according to BoxRec, in the 4th round. So Callum Simpson was one of these guys that fought a lot. He stayed active, probably a ticket seller, and
got a Zach Chelly win, right? Am I wrong about that?
Got a Zach Chelly win, world-class win, but I don't know. This is one of these fights that I'm sure we're going to see a lot of stories about, and I'm sure you and me really don't care about it. It kind of fits that. I guess there's fights like for us, like Jahai Tucker fights might fit this for British fans, where they completely don't care just yet. But like for American fans, like this fight does nothing for me. I truly don't care. And it's going to be presented as like a really, really crossroads fight of this guy who probably absorbs too much punishment and probably won't make it to the world-class level against a guy that like an American prospect beat pretty handily.
That definitely isn't world-class.
Well, I mean, Williamson, I think, is maybe the 15th best guy in the division, but he's going to be presented as like more than likely as one of the best guys in the division, which is just factually inaccurate.
Yeah, well, but they'll be presented that way because they've already gotten too excited about Simpson. And so the fact that Williamson beat Simpson, well, he must be the guy,
So this weekend, can we Highlander the Callums? So based on who has a better performance,
we got to get some nicknames, bro. These Callums out here got to get some nicknames.
So I think Callum Smith is the leader in the clubhouse right now, is the best Callum. But like maybe we'll get some parody on.
I think
Callum
the best
Simpson.
Callum is the first one to get a real fire ass nickname, bro. I've been saying that for like 3 years now. I'm telling you, if one of these Callums, bro, they get a nickname that sticks, they're the Callum.
I like Callum Smith's nickname, by the way, Mundo.
That is a good one. That is a good one.
I think he's the best Callum right now. Callum Smith is the best Callum.
Well, he's been the best. He's been reigning Callum for quite some time now.
Pound for pound Callum. I mean, he's been good enough that we've cared about him since 2018.
Yeah, no, he's actually a world-class guy. He's actually maybe like the 6th best guy in his division. He's the reigning Callum.
Yeah. So I think that this weekend, the hidden storyline, the Lukie boxing storyline is where does Callum Walsh fit in adjacent to Callum Simpson? Like, who's the more dominant of the two? Like, which Callum is gonna get there?
Who's this next star Callum?
I know Callum Walsh is King Callum. Let's see. What do you think Callum Simpson's nickname is?
I don't know.
I'm looking it up right now.
King Callum, I need a little more heat than that, bro.
Well, Callum Simpson doesn't have a nickname right now. So if he listened to the show, which I'm sure he won't, he could be the guy. A win here and a good nickname. I mean,
Oh my
that could
God,
be it.
dude.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, bro. One of these guys gets a good nickname, bro. They're the Callum, because they're gonna stick out. They're gonna stick out.
What would you call him?
Who? Callum Simpson?
Yeah.
Callum
Homer Simpson?
No, it's got to be more personal, dude.
Okay. What about cross-eyed? Cross-eyed Callum Simpson.
That's very like 1930s fisticuffs.
But I mean, I feel like that could play
like left eye, Larry,
because like that's kind of like the gimmick of the style, right? It's like, look at how well I take a punch.
Yeah.
So like,
a lot of this.
Play it up. Yeah, I mean, I feel when I was watching Pierce O'Leary and Mark Chamberlain, I felt like I was watching one of those where it's like, no, I'm okay. Let me get hit again, straight, flush. See how I
like
take
watching
the punch.
like Jake Lamont. And I know people, he has historical significance, but just watching Jake LaMotta get hit clean in the head 19 times in a row, be like, no one could put him down,
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't need that. Dakota, we're gonna end the show. Where can people follow you this week?
Well, you can always follow me here at the Lukie Boxing Show. You can follow me on the Slip and Weave podcast. Just put out an interview with Kaylee Knight, which Lukie was kind enough to help set up. You can catch me and episodes of The Fight Life on ITR Boxing, and we will see you next week.